The low-altitude roar of turbines sliced through the humid dawn air over southern Ukraine. Radar operators along the Russian-occupied coastline caught a brief flicker, a ghost echo barely visible on their Podlet K1 screens before it vanished into the electronic fog. What they didn't realize was that a Ukrainian MiG-29 had just crossed into its strike corridor, flying at Treetop level to evade early warning detection. The mission was a calculated gamble-deliver modified French AASM glide bombs against a Russian logistics hub in occupied Crimea, then escape alive. As the jet skimmed through the forest edge, its terrain-following radar flickered under intense GPS jamming from Russian Krasuka 4 systems. The interference wasn't new. Moscow had saturated southern Ukraine with powerful electronic warfare to cripple Western guided munitions, but this time the pilot relied on a hybrid inertial guidance patch, a result of months of US-Ukrainian technical cooperation under the 2025 Defense Assistance upgrades approved by President Donald Trump's administration. Then disaster struck. A bird slammed into the MiG's right intake, causing a vibration spike and partial thrust loss. Yet the aircraft held formation with its own shadow hugging the ground like a missile. Inside Russian control rooms, the tension built. One operator hesitated as conflicting altitude readings flashed on his scope. The radar beam was momentarily blocked by a hill, the ghost signal lost in clutter. That hesitation proved fatal for the base below. At 04:27 local time, the MiG-29 began its pop-up maneuver. Rising almost vertically through 2,000 meters, it entered the engagement envelope of a nearby S-400 battery, but before target lock could stabilize, the Ukrainian jet had already launched its payload. The improvised AASM interface adapted from a NATO standard system briefly froze under G-load, forcing a manual override. It's an engineering miracle these integrations even work, commented retired Royal Air Force Group Captain Mark Hunter in a BBC analysis, but it shows the ingenuity of Ukraine's technicians under wartime constraints. Suddenly, a warning tone filled the cockpit. A Russian Su-35 had fired an R-37M long-range air-to-air missile. Known for its Mach 6 speed and 300-kilometer range, it was one of the most lethal threats in the air war, but the Ukrainian pilot anticipated it. He executed a violent split-S maneuver, diving back toward ground clutter. The missile's seeker overshot, confused by jamming bursts from NATO-supplied towed decoys. Below, Russian troops scrambled as the bombs detached and glided silently through the thin morning mist. This strike wasn't about territory, it was about precision technology. Every maneuver reflected the evolution of 21st century warfare hybrid avionics, patched Western systems, and algorithmic improvisation beating brute force. The real question now loomed: could Ukraine's reliance on hybridized Western weaponry redefine modern aerial warfare? Or was this a one-off stroke of luck in a war shaped by electronic chaos? At the edge of the engagement zone, the Ukrainian MiG-29 rocketed into the sky, the vapor trail slicing a jagged line through the sunrise. Inside, the pilot wrestled with both the machine and the math timed to impact enemy reaction window and radar bloom angle. Every fraction of a second mattered. The aircraft's onboard systems strained under electronic duress. Warning lights flickered like dying embers as the improvised French AASM interface temporarily crashed its NATO standard data link, faltering under heavy G-force. The pilot reverted to manual override, an almost extinct art in the era of digital warfare. His thumb hovered over the standoff release trigger while the targeting reticle blinked red to gray, caught between malfunction and miracle. Then for a breathless instant, telemetry locked in. The glide bombs dropped free, their INS modules spinning up mid-air to compensate for the loss of GPS synchronization. The Russian Su-35 pilot, orbiting 30 kilometers away, saw the flare on his radar scope and instantly fired another R-37M. The missile screamed toward the MiG at hypersonic speed. Yet the Ukrainian aircraft twisted into a notch maneuver, a delicate tactic that forces incoming radar-guided weapons to lose lock by flying perpendicular to their radar beam. For seconds, the R-37M's trajectory went blind. That same tactic perfected during NATO's Syrian engagements had been quietly passed to Ukraine through simulation exchanges and data analytics programs. We're witnessing the battlefield application of knowledge once shared only among Western pilots, said defense news analyst Peter Layton, a retired RAAF group captain. It's proof of how Allied combat algorithms are now blending with Eastern hardware. Below the two AASM glide bombs, built from a mix of French smart kits and Ukrainian Soviet-era warheads, glided silently across the landscape. Their infrared seekers flickered confused by the sun's low-angle reflection off the Black Sea. For 15 kilometers, they traveled without external correction, navigating purely on inertial memory. The pilot's instruments screamed once more lock-on warning. A second R-37M missile was closing fast, its plasma trail glowing faintly in the rearview mirror. With split-second instinct, the MiG dropped a magnesium flare salvo and pitched downward into a high-speed dive. The radar spike vanished from the missile's seeker. It detonated harmlessly in the thin air behind. This was more than aerial skill, it was a technological chess match. Each move showcased how electronic warfare had reshaped the concept of survival. The MiG-29's legacy systems, originally designed for Cold War dogfights, were now operating as hybrid testbeds for 21st century algorithmic warfare. Ukraine's pilots have turned their jets into flying laboratories, noted Jane's Defense Weekly. They're gathering live telemetry that NATO could only dream of during training. As the AASM bombs curved toward the coastline, Russian air defense operators scrambled, uncertain of what exactly was incoming. In their confusion lay the heart of Ukraine's new doctrine: unpredictability, powered by makeshift technology and courage. What comes next when improvisation itself becomes a weapon? The MiG-29's nose leveled at 200 meters above the tree line, barely enough clearance to avoid the shockwave from its own bombs. The cockpit radar filtered through an aging Soviet Doppler unit patched to a Western targeting display, flickered again, showing two glowing returns, the glide bombs now entering terminal phase. The pilot knew he had seconds before Russian countermeasures activated. On the ground, the first Russian S-400 operator to respond misread the incoming tracks. The missile's steep downward glide path appeared as ballistic debris, not a precision-guided threat. By the time the software recalculated, the intercept geometry had collapsed. The S-400's radar couldn't achieve stable lock at that high descent angle. Its algorithms simply weren't built for such trajectories. A Panzer S-1 battery nearby engaged next. Its cannons erupted in a deafening roar, spitting 30mm shells into the sky, but its elevation limits prevented effective fire against vertical targets. One of the AASM bombs streaked through the burst pattern untouched. The Russian operators trained for conventional cruise or drone attacks had never faced a hybrid glide bomb performing a near-vertical dive. Ukraine's engineers effectively created a new strike profile, said Rand Corporation researcher Dr. Helena Strauss in an interview with The Guardian. By exploiting geometry, they bypassed the most sophisticated Russian defenses without needing stealth or supersonic capability. The MiG's radar warning receiver lit up again another missile launch. A Tor M2 had fired short-range interceptors from within the base perimeter, but the missiles detonated prematurely, fooled by chaff and decoy fragments. Meanwhile, the two ASMs entered their terminal guidance mode, switching to infrared and image-matching seekers. Their target was not arbitrary. Satellite imagery from NATO's ISR constellation had pinpointed a Russian maintenance hangar containing refueling trucks, spare ammunition, and several BTR-82A armored vehicles lined up for inspection. The first bomb's seeker locked onto the hangar's heat signature. It plunged almost vertically, striking the roof with a shaped charge warhead designed to pierce hardened structures. The explosion created a narrow diagonal jet of molten metal that sliced through two armored personnel carriers below, setting off secondary detonations. The second bomb, slightly off course due to wind shear, reacquired its target mid-descent, a cluster of idling fuel trucks. When it hit, the blast generated a brief white flash followed by a rolling fireball. The pressure wave flattened the nearby storage depot. Sensors from US surveillance drones orbiting offshore recorded the thermal bloom over 1,200 degrees Celsius at core temperature. Within 30 seconds, the Russian base was engulfed in chaos, fuel tanks, erupting ammunition, cooking off radio frequencies, collapsing under emergency chatter. The MiG, already turning north, caught the first shockwave buffeting its airframe. Defense analysts from DW later called it a masterpiece of tactical improvisation. Ukraine had turned a legacy airframe and jury-rigged technology into a precision strike platform capable of defeating a layered Russian air defense grid. Yet beyond the flames, a sobering reality lingered. The very success of this attack revealed how modern war is less about raw power and more about adaptive intelligence machines, learning faster than doctrines can catch up. Could this shift signal the birth of a new era in air warfare where software and geometry outfight speed and armor? For nearly 3 minutes, the Crimean coastline burned like a scar in the dawn. From Sevastopol to Jankoy, Russian radar networks scrambled to piece together what had happened. The S-400 operators reviewing telemetry found no indication of a traditional cruise missile signature. The system's algorithms had filtered the MiG's bombs out as atmospheric clutter. In modern warfare, that was the deadliest deception of all, not stealth by design, but stealth by improvisation. Across NATO command centers in Poland and Romania, data analysts pored over real-time feeds from US RQ-4 Global Hawks. The high-altitude drones confirmed the destruction of the fuel depot and a section of the maintenance hangar. Analysts noticed something else: not a single S-400 missile had detonated near its intended intercept point. Each engagement failed because of angular limitations. Those missiles were built to counter targets approaching horizontally, not falling vertically. This is what happens when doctrine lags behind adaptation, explained retired US Air Force Colonel Marcus Devereaux on BBC World. Ukraine just exposed a geometry gap in Russia's billion-dollar air defenses. Those systems can't shoot straight up effectively. It's the blind spot of a nation that built for NATO bombers, not guerrilla airstrikes. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the Ministry of Defense issued a terse statement claiming partial damage and neutralized enemy aircraft. Satellite imagery would soon contradict that claim. By the next morning, Reuters confirmed visual confirmation of at least 7 destroyed vehicles and secondary explosions at the strike site. At the tactical level, the aftermath proved more revealing than the blast itself. Russian units scrambled to reposition their air defense launchers, widening radar coverage and reducing dead angles near key bases. But such reconfiguration took hours, sometimes days, time Ukraine's command could exploit. The MiG-29, having expended its payload, streaked northward under fading light. It wasn't unscathed. The earlier bird strike had degraded its right engine, forcing a steady throttle reduction. Fuel consumption surged. Over the radio ground controllers coordinated with NATO reconnaissance aircraft to provide corridor guidance, an unspoken signal of deep cooperation between Western intelligence and Ukrainian Strike Command. Defense News later revealed that the mission used encrypted data link relays bouncing through SpaceX's Starshield system, an advanced military-grade offshoot of Starlink. This network gave Ukraine real-time geolocation data even amid heavy jamming, proof that war in 2025 had fused Silicon Valley with the battlefield. On Russian screens, confusion reigned. Early warning radars misinterpreted the retreating MiG as a friendly Su-30 due to its transponder echo spoofed by Western EW pods. By the time correction algorithms updated, the aircraft was gone, disappearing into the night, leaving the base smoldering behind. The operation was more than a strike, it was a lesson. Warfare was no longer about who possessed more missiles, but who understood how to bend technology to their advantage. Ukraine, with its hybrid aircraft and borrowed code, had outmaneuvered a superpower's infrastructure using ingenuity and timing. If the West learns from this, could NATO's own air doctrines evolve to counter hypersonic and electronic age threats? Or will future wars continue to be won by those who improvise faster than their enemies can predict? Hours after the attack, infrared satellite images continued to show heat signatures glowing from the wreckage. Russian emergency crews flooded the site, battling fires that reignited every time stored munitions exploded. Smoke drifted over Crimea's western ridge, a reminder that even the most fortified bases are never invincible. In Washington, President Donald Trump was briefed at the National Security Council. Though the administration publicly downplayed the strike, sources cited by Reuters and Defense News confirmed that U.S. defense officials saw the operation as a breakthrough demonstration of hybrid warfare. This was an inflection point, commented retired U.S. Navy Admiral James Fago. A single MiG equipped with Western electronics and domestic ingenuity dismantled an air defense equation worth billions. Analysts quickly dissected the technology behind it. The French AASM bomb, also known as the Hammer, was never designed for Soviet airframes. Its modular guidance kits rely on precise digital architecture incompatible with older MiG-29 wiring. Ukrainian engineers spent months reprogramming interface converters and analog to digital bridges to make the weapons talk to the aircraft's primitive fire control system. The result was crude but lethal. Jane's Defense Weekly revealed that the modified bombs carried 250 kilos warheads with multi-mode seekers, inertial for mid-course infrared for terminal attack, and algorithmic image matching for final impact. These munitions required no external GPS after release, an advantage against Russia's powerful jamming umbrellas in Crimea. As the investigation deepened, NATO intelligence learned that Russia's own counter-EW systems had interfered with each other during the engagement. That's the paradox of oversaturation, explained Dr. Anya Kovalchuk, a cybersecurity researcher at DW's defense desk. When you deploy too many jammers, you start blinding yourself. It's electronic fratricide. The tactical consequences were immediate. Russian command ordered every S-400 and Panzer battery within Crimea to switch to new engagement protocols, lower altitude filters, faster radar rescan rates, and integration with counter-drone AI. But even as they adapted, the fundamental issue remained reaction time. The attack had lasted less than 4 minutes, giving operators almost no decision space. This episode rippled through military circles across Europe and Asia. In Israel, Air Force planners saw echoes of their own standoff strike doctrine against Iran. In Taiwan, defense analysts began studying Ukraine's adaptive tactics as a potential model for surviving initial salvos of a Chinese assault. The concept of technological improvisation, turning old weapons into asymmetric instruments, was now part of modern military vocabulary. Within days, The Guardian ran an editorial headline, "When Code Beats Power, the Future of Hybrid Air Combat." It argued that the next wars would not be defined by stealth bombers or hypersonic missiles, but by the speed at which soldiers and engineers could merge incompatible systems under fire. Ukraine's success was both symbolic and strategic. It demonstrated that dominance could come not from new hardware, but from creativity under pressure. Yet one question lingered across war rooms from Brussels to Washington: if a single outdated fighter could outwit Russia's defenses, what would happen if this tactic scaled up across NATO's air fleets? The returning MiG-29 limped across the Dnipro estuary, its right engine coughing smoke, hydraulic pressure, warning lights blinking in a grim rhythm. The pilot kept the damaged jet steady, guided by digital handshakes through NATO's secure Starshield network. As dawn gave way to morning, he crossed back into Ukrainian-controlled airspace alive, but barely. On radar screens across Europe, analysts watched the icon disappear into safety, symbolizing not just survival, but a paradigm shift in modern warfare. When ground crews later examined the aircraft, they found the right intake torn, avionics fried by electromagnetic interference, and thermal shielding scorched from missile near misses. Yet the data recorder was intact. Inside it lay hundreds of gigabytes of combat telemetry, precise engagement timing, missile behavior, and electronic countermeasure efficiency. Within days, this information was transmitted to defense laboratories in Warsaw, Berlin, and Washington for study. That data, according to Reuters defense correspondents, would later influence NATO's 2025 Adaptive Strike Framework, a new doctrine emphasizing mixed-generation aircraft cooperation, algorithmic flight autonomy, and real-time EW adaptation. The Ukrainian mission became its blueprint. But in Moscow, the implications cut deeper. Russian analysts were forced to admit that their integrated air defense network, long marketed as impenetrable, contained fatal blind zones. The Kremlin quietly ordered an emergency upgrade of S-400 targeting algorithms to counter steep-angle threats, while engineers scrambled to develop new wide-field radar modules. It was a tacit acknowledgement that even superpower arsenals could be undone by tactical creativity. Western experts viewed it as a glimpse into the next stage of air combat. This wasn't just a battle between two aircraft, said Air Commodore Nigel Pearson, retired RAF and consultant to Defense News. It was a battle between adaptability and rigidity. The side that learns faster wins. As Trump's Pentagon prepared its next aid package to Kyiv, focused on electronic warfare resilience and hybrid standoff munitions, debates erupted in NATO about applying these lessons elsewhere. Could similar improvisations counter Iran's drone swarms? Could legacy fighters in Taiwan or Poland replicate Ukraine's success against a technologically superior enemy? By mid-2025, those questions were shaping procurement policies across the West. Germany fast-tracked AI-assisted radar fusion systems for its Eurofighters, while the US Air Force authorized trials integrating F-16s with AI co-pilots capable of real-time threat analysis, a concept directly inspired by Ukrainian combat telemetry. The strike in Crimea thus transcended geography. It symbolized how intelligence, adaptation, and courage could rewrite the laws of engagement. No stealth, no super weapon, just ingenuity and willpower meeting at the edge of physics. When the footage of the burning Russian base surfaced across social media, its shockwave wasn't just military, it was psychological. Ukraine had shown the world that even the smallest actor, when armed with creativity and precision, could challenge the world's largest military powers. And yet, as global tensions mount from the Persian Gulf to the Taiwan Strait, the lesson remains unresolved. In the age of code and chaos, will future wars be won by technology itself or by the humans daring enough to rewrite it in real time? The Ukrainian MiG-29 strike on a Russian base in Crimea marked a turning point in 21st century warfare. Flying a retrofitted Cold War jet equipped with Western hybrid systems, the pilot defied GPS jamming hypersonic threats and layered air defenses to deliver 2 precision ASM strikes that crippled a key logistics hub. The mission exposed critical weaknesses in Russia's S-400 network, specifically its inability to counter steep trajectory standoff weapons, and demonstrated how electronic improvisation could overpower superior hardware. Global analysts now view this operation as the prototype for hybrid air warfare, where software fusion, real-time intelligence, and adaptive tactics outweigh sheer firepower. Under President Trump's renewed defense cooperation policy, NATO adopted lessons from the strike to develop AI-driven electronic countermeasures and multi-platform coordination doctrines. In its aftermath, the burning base in Crimea became more than a battlefield. It became a symbol of how innovation, not inventory, defines victory. The war had evolved from one of attrition to one of adaptation, and as nations from Israel to Taiwan studied Ukraine's success, a haunting question persisted. If old machines can outthink new ones, what happens when all sides learn to improvise at